Hello everyone, once again I guess I should actually wave at you. It doesn't count unless you're waving at the camera. It doesn't count. Actually, these Havel's gloves weren't canon. How'd these get in here? Let's change that to... Let's change it to something less stupid. Oh, by the way, hello everyone. I already said that. What the hell am I doing? Today we're going to be going down into Ash Lake, but not before I put something more tolerable on the... Here we go. The reason why people wear Havel's gauntlets, and I think I've said this before, the reason why people do that is because Havel stuff has very good poise to weight ratio. So people tend to wear the gauntlets because they are slightly less stupid looking than the rest of Havel's set, which itself is pretty stupid looking. Another complaint. All he does is... You got that damn right. That's why I chose the name. Alright. But here we have, it's either Sigmar or Siglin. Who's it going to be? It's totally Siglin.
Well, hello again. I have finally located my father. All of your help was invaluable to us. Thank you so much. I was finally able to pass on my mother's last words.
Okay. One more time.
My father? He went on his final adventure. Don't worry. That's just the way he is. Undead or no. Sort of reassuring, really. He goes hollow. I'll just have to kill him again.
That is slightly not assuring. So, the reason why it is revealed that the reason why Siglin here was on a search for her father was to deliver her mother's last words. So she has delivered that. That's done. And apparently, it is confirmed Sigmar is undead. And she says that she will have to kill him again. Some people take this to mean that she's the one that caused her father to become undead in the first place, in the sense that she killed him and he just so happened to become undead. So maybe there's some bad blood between the two of these people, or maybe it's just that she's saying, I will have to kill him again, in the sense that he was killed once before, and if he does go hollow, then she'll just have to put him down the second time around. So it could either mean that she's the one that was responsible for him dying in the first place, or it just could mean that she's just saying that he was murdered in his human life, and that it might have to happen again if he ends up losing control. Which, given that she has just delivered her mother's final farewell, her final words, and what exactly her final words are, we don't know. It could mean that, and this stems from the prior episode where I was talking about Sigmar's NFL career. Yes. That maybe that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and now he's going on his quote-unquote final adventure for a reason. That does seem to be the implication, that this has pushed him completely over the edge. And now he's about to do something.
My father?
His final adventure.
Don't worry. That's just the way he is. Undead or no. Sort of reassuring, really. He goes hollow. I'll just have to kill him again.
I think Miyazaki kind of forgets sometimes in Dark Souls that if you kill a hollow, they just come back. You know, there's still a hollow. I mean, you're not really doing anything to help him. Like, maybe Siglin actually believes that this is actually going to put a stop to... Miyazaki sometimes seems to treat the undead curse, maybe this is an early development thing or something, but he seems to treat the undead curse sometimes as being sort of like zombieism. That you go hollow, you know, you go crazy, and then if you kill the hollow, then, oh, you don't have to worry about it anymore. But that's not how it works in the game. If you go hollow, then you're still undead. You still keep coming back over and over again. It doesn't matter if what remains of your sense of self and your humanity and everything is completely evaporated into the ether, you're still going to keep coming back. Although I guess the idea is that if you keep killing them over and over again, eventually all the power that made them so powerful in life will eventually dissipate, and they will kind of return into one of these little kind of guys like up there. They're kind of just, yeah, they're kind of shitty. Like, they really don't have much power. And, this is kind of a Demon Souls thing, but, you know, the reason why, you know, I'm so powerful, or, you know, like, Tarkus is so powerful, or, you know, Ornstein, whatever, is because they have a lot of soul energy, I guess you would say, inside of their body. Remember how and I've said this before, remember we started at the beginning of the game, like, level nothing? You know, like, a Pyromancer starts at level 1, for example. And, some other people start at, like, level 6 or 10 or whatever. I don't think anyone goes to 10. I can't remember. Anyways, those are basically human limitations. Like, that, whenever you come to Lordran, those, like, that's as far as humans go. And that's kind of a demon souls thing that was kind of just carried over into Dark Souls without any explanation. But the more souls that we accrue, the more powerful that we become, because it's kind of infusing into our flesh, and it's just making us intrinsically more powerful. So I guess killing the Hollow over and over again will cause that soul energy to leave them, maybe, and that will diminish their original power to the point that they end up becoming a husk, and that will mean that they become less threatening. So if Siglin here actually has a plan, I guess that's it. I don't know. But he's going on his final adventure. And she does seem... Don't worry, that's the way he is. It seems to imply that she was not sure exactly how he was going to take this news. But the fact that he took it as, well, I guess I'll just go on a final adventure, seems to be reassuring to her. As though, you know, she has this father that was kind of just absent-minded, always going off on adventures and never really thinking too much about things. So whenever he listened to his wife's final farewell, whatever her final words happened to be, apparently she did not turn, apparently she's not undead if she just straight up died and she had to deliver final words. Otherwise she would just come back and still have, you know, she would still be sane. For at least for a while, before she went hollow over and over again. So what exactly her final words were, I don't know, but they seem to have not been too great. Or at least the shock of losing her has sent him completely over the edge. I do get the impression, my personal kind of impression, is that he did this all throughout their marriage and all through her childhood. Like, maybe he was the kind of father that was never really at home because he was always off on an adventure in the first place. So, I don't know. To me, I really don't think that his wife's final... Like, I'm writing my own thing in my head right now, so don't take this as, like, canon information, obviously. But in my head, it seems like her final words would have been more reassuring. Maybe a sort of, forget about all the faults that you had as a husband and a father, you know, don't worry about it. We ended up being fine ourselves, or something like that, whatever her final words happened to be. And even that would have been very... That would have really gotten to him, I imagine. If he had, that would be something that he always considered to be a fault of his own, because he was always a little bit too dumb and a little bit too enamored with his own goals in life. Which is kind of a male thing, you know? Like, a lot of guys will get married and have kids or whatever, but they always have this one thing, like this ambition in life, or this one love, that they can never quite let go, even though their, you know, wife, or their, yeah, or husband, why not, you know, whatever. Or, you know, kids or whatnot, express irritation that they're doing it or whatever it happens to be. And that is always in the back of their mind, because it's a great love that they can't quite give up on. And it goes for women too, I imagine. But it is a very male thing in regards to, you know, gender roles and whatnot. So that's kind of how I read into things, I guess. Anyways, our next stop is going to be going down, deep into Blighttown. And that's where we're going to find him. By the way, I'm going to point up at my monitor. I'm pointing... Why aren't you looking? Why aren't you tracking my finger? Well, you notice at the top left of the screen, this is my little node thing by... This is a PvP watchdog, which was written by you/Europa. Yes, in case you couldn't tell. But if... I did a little stream with Bitterbits and German Spy, once again, on, like, last Saturday or something like that. And, we use this because Franz could not get connected to anybody. And even after installing Watchdog and tracking it, I eventually got nodes. Like, it takes me a long time to get these damn little nodes. And he got none. So apparently we're not doing something right on his end, which is something that we're going to need to fix, which I'm sure that they will not be willing to experiment with until it's the day to stream. Again. But that's what that is. And so long. Just hit F9 and it goes away. Forever! I'll probably forget that I even have it installed and wonder what went wrong, so I'll have to come back and listen to this video and be like, no, future Eli, just press F9, and everything will be just fine. I could have warped down here, I guess, but I just want to take the long way. But first things first, I guess I should take care of this. I never looked at her soul last time. The Bed of Chaos. Oh, Mother of Demons! I hate you. I really hate you. No, don't walk off the edge. What the hell are you doing? Lord Soul, soul of the bed of chaos, and the mother of all demons. This Lord Soul was found at the dawn of the Age of Fire. I'm pretty sure I didn't read this. What I read that was so close to this being... It's probably another thing. Don't worry about it. The Witch of Izalith attempted to duplicate the first flame from a soul. Huh. Attempted to duplicate the first flame from a soul. Not her soul, but a soul. Huh. Huh. But instead created a distorted being of chaos and fire. And that was the bed of chaos. I assume, is what it's referring to as. Its power formed a bed of life which would become the source of all demons, and is more than enough to satiate the Lord Vessel. So if Dark Souls 3 is a sequel, it shouldn't have demons. And Dark Souls 2 shouldn't have had demons because they don't have anything to spring from anymore. But they didn't seem to understand that. They didn't seem to understand that. Anyways. In regards to this, I get that there's really not much to go over, I guess. I've kind of gone over this before. A template to duplicate the first flame. Like, she was straight up just trying to make the same thing over again. Which is pretty weird. You know, we still really don't know what exactly the first flame is. Where it came from, why it exists in the first place. And for the purposes of the story, it's really not that important. Because unlike Bloodborne... Bloodborne sucks. Shut up, Plague! I'll downvote your video! No, Bloodborne sucks. Sorry. But unlike Bloodborne, I'm just saying it for the sake of saying it. No, it's out of range. Come here. The point of this game is not really necessarily how, like, the Dark Soul works and how, you know, blah, blah, blah. That's really not the point. The point of all this is more... Is this doo-doo? Doo-doo. I'm always afraid of picking these things up. Not because it's doo-doo, but because I might accidentally get, like, a large club in here somewhere, and I'll have to go in my inventory and get rid of it. But the game doesn't really focus too much on that. Like, how does it work? What are all the things? It's more just, this is the setup. How does this affect everyone in the world? More doo-doo, which I will never use. But I'll collect it anyways. Because I need it for later, for things. But that's the general point of this. And are they stone coming down here? They kind of do sort of look like stone. And it's hard to tell whether or not the arch tree that we're going to be going down today is actually made of stone or if it's made out of wood. Am I? Yeah, I'm still undead. Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. Forgot about all that. But that's one thing that we're going to be looking at today. But in regards to the bed of chaos and all that, and it's kind of been over all that before. Just the idea that she was actually trying to replicate that in the first place. So she seemed to believe that the original First Flame sort of worked the same way that Gwyn tried to make it work. Like, Gwyn ignited his own soul as kindling in order to try to keep the fire lit. So they seem to think of it as being something that stems from soul power. Like, Gwyn tried to use his flame as kindling, tried to use his soul as kindling, and the Witch of Izalith attempted to use a soul, which is not stipulated what exactly that soul was. Although I guess if I had to make a guess, maybe it was the Fire Sage that we learned about, since he declared that he was the first of all demons. Maybe that's what it's referring to. That she used him as the experiment or something. Because it doesn't say her soul, it just says a soul, which is really unusual. But anyways, if I had to make a guess. So, in her own planning stages, whenever she was actually trying to figure this out, like, how do we maintain the Age of Fire? Her best guess was, well, I can take an existing soul and try to transform it into another First Flame. Which, you know, even given our very flimsy knowledge of how all this works, it doesn't seem like it would be a very good idea. Because the First Flame, you know, has all these aspects. Like, it has the soul of death, and the soul of life, and the soul of light, and the soul of dark. So it's not like you can just take an ordinary soul that's just lying around and try to turn it into another First Flame. The First Flame itself seems like it would be something that is incredibly unique. That has all these sort of intrinsic qualities that are completely unknowable by humans or witches or gods. Like, it's something that's just completely mysterious. I don't know why I mean... I know what it is. I got so used to doing this little farming run trying to collect these green Titanite shards from these guys during my SL11 build that I was doing the other day, or a few days ago, or actually a couple weeks ago by now, that I have just gotten used to trying to avoid poison because I had, you know, it was an SL1 build for quite a while. Anyways, what the hell was I saying about the witch? It is that she was blah blah blah, that she was blah 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 blah. Oh, just the idea that the first flame is something that's completely unique. And why it's unique, we really don't know. Oh, I never lit this, really? Well, I never came down here, I know, but I thought I came down here and lit it. Oh well. Anyways, this is where we're going today. Thank you, condensation. I have a glass of water. And its condensation loves to make that coaster stick to the bottom of it. I'm sure that I won't spill any water on my keyboard today. That would never happen. Ice water is best water. I got to the point where I can actually stomach drinking a whole cup of tea, and I actually did that the other day. Like, over the span of, like, 3 minutes, too. Like, I just took 3 gulps of the damn thing. It was like, that's it. And I really felt like shit that day. Okay, anyways. I guess before I go in, just to put a period on the end of that bit of chaos stuff. Just the idea that the first flame is unique. They found out that they could not make another one. Apparently. Because that did not turn out well at all. But it seems like anytime that you use an existing soul and just whatever, I don't even know what the hell she did, but remember that the witch is able to do this because she has the soul of life. She is able to manipulate life, and that's what, like, fire sorcery and pyromancy now, pyromancy being a warped form of fire sorcery, that's what that is. Like, you're manipulating the essence of what life happens to be. And humans have the capability of manipulating physicality and so on. Or existing as physicality, which is where we get the process of holification from. That's what the Dark Soul is. But just, for some reason, whenever you use an existing soul, that creates this sort of reverse thing going on. Like, this tree that we're in. This is an arch tree. Or like, whenever we see the opening cinematic, the dragons lived inside of these arch trees, supposedly. And these were, like, the only things in the gray world. Like, there was just endless nothing. It was just gray. Just shitty gray everywhere. No civilization, no life, no death. Just the dragons, for some reason, and the dragons were basically just like stone creatures. Like, they don't have souls. They're just stone beings that happen to exist. And even whenever Gwyn's, like, throwing his lightning bolts at these guys, they don't even seem to really give a shit. Like, they don't react in pain or anything. They just sort of blow apart and just gonna kind of go, and they just kind of fall over. And that's the end of them. So it's whenever they defeat the dragons, it's sort of like they're just blowing apart stone. And this, by the way, is the only thing worth getting in this entire holo, unless you're going for a very early, very specific kind of build. And it is the Chloranthy Ring. It's right here. Thank you, Chloranthy Ring. Thank you for being right here. But the other thing I wanted to point out in regards to the Bed of Chaos is just the idea that it's very unusual that she was the one that tried to ignite the new first flame. Oh, sorry, the tree, by the way. The arch tree that we're in right now. It goes from being stone into, like, wood, right? So that's what the first flame does. Whereas the Bed of Chaos's flame, the Chaos Flame, which warped life, seems to do it in reverse. Like, it takes things that are made of stone and gives them... Or, I don't know. It takes things that are stone that never existed in the first place and gives them quote-unquote life. Like, they exist as stone beings now. Sort of like the dragons did. Except they don't have the capacity for having a soul or something like that. It's really bizarre. I explained it in the prior episode. But anyways, that's what happens whenever you corrupt an existing soul. So apparently the first flame is the opposite of whatever that is. Like, if you wanted to make another first flame, maybe instead of taking an existing soul, you would take something that we never see. Or maybe something you would have to, like, ignite nothing. I don't know, it's really bizarre. It's one of those things that maybe they'll solve on Dark Souls 3. Yay! I can't wait for Miyazaki to write Dark Souls 3, and he's like, what's the Dark Soul? I don't remember that. Or something like that. And then it's having the facepalm, because it's like, oh, why did you have to make a sequel? Why couldn't you just make another game? Because Miyazaki is always doing that. He's he doesn't remember things. He just reuses things over and over again. And he doesn't take it very seriously. So whenever you make a sequel, he's not even a sequel kind of guy. He's outright avoided it up to this point. So it's really strange. Makes me think that Namco Bandai, or is it Bandai Namco? Namco Bandai, whoever the hell they are. They're the ones that are pushing for it because they know that the name is going to have a lot of leverage in marketing. Anyways, whatever. I was going to say something else about that, but I guess it's not important. Just the idea that the tree, stone, tree, wood. You get the idea, who cares? Okay, Gloranthy ring. This ancient ring, engraved with a large green flower, is of unknown origin. Hastens the regeneration of stamina. Thank you, Miyazaki. That is really illuminating. This ancient ring, engraved with a large green flower, so it's very old, is of unknown origin. Yes, alright. Give you a nice American clap. Nice American clap. Oh, yeah. I love that movie. I love the movie. Okay, thank you, Miyazaki, for that. But I guess the idea is that since it's here inside of the Great Hollow, which is... Assumingly, this is where humans and gods and all the creatures, the pygmy creatures that after defeating the dragons, this is how they came up into the world that we exist in now. They use this, the Great Hollow. And if this is here, then supposedly this is something that was created prior to the Age of Fire. So, I imagine this is one of those things that, to be honest, is probably like they said, we want a ring that increases stamina regeneration. And Miyazaki said, okay, design one, and then they designed it. And then they were like, where do we put it? And he said, put it somewhere where they can get it early if they want it. But it's kind of dangerous to go get it because having more stamina regeneration is pretty risky. And they said, what about we put it in the secret place? Okay, put it there. And then he went back over the item description later, and it's like, we don't know where it came from. Done. And then he signed it off, and that was the end of it. So yeah, not particularly interesting. Thanks, Miyazaki, for nothing. Boop. But this is also probably the easiest way down here, by the way. If you want, like, a shitload of, like, various kinds of Titanite. White Titanite, red Titanite, balloon Titanite, starter Titanite, all the colors of the rainbow. If you want all those, then you can spend, like, the next 2 hours slowly dropping down each one of these branches and trying to get all the damn things. Like, they're all over the place. They're just all over the fucking place. And there's also crystal lizards down here, which I am not going to be chasing. Because crystal lizards are basically just death traps. They're like, come get me, fucker. And then you trip and fall, and then you die because, crystal lizards. And that's their design. That's just what they do. That's their life. Camera basilisk, sweetie. I won't be chasing those, though. Also, there are basilisks down here. Oh, for goodness sakes. You little sweethearts. Yeah, there are basilisks down here. You're gonna give me an Eye of Death? You're gonna give me an Eye of Death. And you remember I went over this many times before, but Eyes of Death linked to Nito, once again, because it's a Covenant reward item that you give him. The Eye of Death, again, is sort of linked with stone in the first place. Oh, I'm going to have to read this thing again, I bet. I bet because I'm intentionally doing it right now. Where the hell are they? Way down... Goodness, I hate it when it's right in the middle. There are way too many items. If I made a game, there would probably be almost no items at all. And if you did have an item, it would probably be a thing where you just pick it up, and then if you leave a bonfire or a base or whatever happens to be, you get like 3 to 10 uses of it or something. Sort of like Bloodborne, except you wouldn't have to farm them. You just automatically would get them or something. I don't know how I would do it. I would have some nonsense lore explanation for it. But having all these things is, it's such a mess. Anyways, Eye of Death, online play item, lore items, blah, blah, blah. The dreadful eyes of death spread disaster, blah, blah, blah. Online connectivity. Phantom's lure, the host run under gas. Gasoline production again. So there's multiplayer items. But, more to the point, they come from basilisks. And from their physical design, of course, no, that would be easy. That would be easy. Just look at them here from... I mean, look at this thing. They do look like exactly these things. The fake eyes on these basilisks. As I've mentioned before, and probably everyone should know by now, the big quote-unquote eyes that they actually have are not their real eyes. They are, in fact, big, dumb fake eyes. that they have for some reason. You can look at it from like an evolutionary perspective of, you know, they have these big fake eyes to scare the shit out of people. Which I guess is pretty effective because they're big and weird. But they also... Draw me like one of your sexy French basilisks. But, they also have real eyes, which I've never been able to show because... Oh, you can just barely... Because whenever their corpses ragdoll, their big chunky eyes fall over the rest of their heads, and it's really hard to see. God damn you, basilisks, you're ruining everything. But anyways, they're basilisks, and they turn people... Oh, it left. The stone statue I was about to show off just vanished. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, they turn people into stone. And like the... Imagine that it was here. Imagine a stone statue was right here. Right here, and I just shattered it. But the basilisks breathe this fog onto people, and it turns them into stone. And I guess a normal person, once they turn to stone, they're just stone. They exist as stone now. Like, they're not really alive, they're not really dead. Whereas someone that is hollow, like an undead that is afflicted with the undead curse, once they turn to stone, they no longer have a body. They're not really dead, but, you know, it doesn't matter because you're undead in the first place. But since you don't have a body, then your body reforms itself at a bonfire. And now you resurrect, and that's how that works. But, point being, since these guys are linked with being able to breathe stone on you, they are linked with the sort of stone world. Where the hell is that ladder that I'm thinking of? It's been a long time since I've actually crawled all the way back up. I guess I'll just take the long way down. It doesn't really matter either way. Although it's very risky to just take the long way down, because it's death! I probably will get myself killed trying to do this. Boop! Super dangerous. I forgot how much fall damage you take from, like, nothing. Like, you can't... Goodness, look at that! Like, I just barely dropped and it took a shitload of damage. But even, like, I could roll to this probably fairly easily, but, oh, it is super dangerous. Like, you don't want to try, because it's the Great Hollow, and the Great Hollow fucking sucks. One thing I will point out... There is that ladder. That's where it was. I must have had to... Huh. I don't even remember that. I must have had to... Oh, okay, yeah. I had to take the alternate route. I took the wrong one. I probably still could do that if I went over there, but... who cares? Okay, anyways. But notice in the Great Hollow, like, this is the inside of a great arch tree trunk. But it's hollow. Like, it's just straight up hollow. And there's another tree growing out of it. And also a bunch of branches growing out of it. Really strange. But let's try to make our way down here without dying. Which is going to be very difficult, because this last little section, I'm probably going to glitch off the right side, or the left, this little left edge, and it's going to buck me off the edge of this other model down here. This is going to be a lot of fun. Come on. Come on. For God's sakes. Fucking... guys. Come... Am I a fucking ghost? Am I a fucking ghost? Come on. Do it. FromSoft. Miyazaki. Miyazaki. God's sakes, Miyazaki. What are you doing to me? But it is unusual that there's all these tree limbs and shit growing all over the place on the inside of a tree. It's almost as though the arch tree itself was never really alive. Like, it was always... Like, the dragons lived in the arch trees in the first place, right? So obviously, by the game's own admittance, they were hollow in the first place. They were hollow. Hollow! Just like us. And there's the eye, the pyramid over there. Can't you see it? It's all coming together now. This is very dangerous, by the way, this one last little thing. And these red titanite chunks are very hard to come by, as I talked about in the last episode. But you can't get them down here. Don't you breathe that shit on me. Don't you do that. I have been... Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's right. I came down here like on my early SL1 build because I was collecting these red titanite chunks. And I thought all these guys were dead, and then one of them jumped out and petrified me while I was tabbed out. And that's like the only time I think I've ever actually been turned to stone by these guys. Like, it's pretty hard to actually be hit by them, unless you're just trying to face fuck them. And you get hit by several of these guys at the same time. Like, I'm not saying if you ever, yeah, you're stupid. No, I mean, you can get turned to stone by these guys pretty easily, but you have to be, like, right in front of them and just wallowing inside of this filth to be able to have it happen to you. Also be very careful of these little bitty holes that are all over the place. You can drop down and fall inside those things. And the thing that I wanted to show you is right here? Right here? No, it's not right here at all. Where is it? Come on. Where's the fucking ladder? Oh, for God's sakes. Miyazaki. Miyazaki. Miyazaki, where's the ladder? There it is. Okay. But this is the way back up. Like, if you come here early in the game and you don't have the ability to warp, getting back up to Firelink Shrine is a big pain in the ass. Especially if you, accidentally rest at the bonfire that's down here, which is pretty easy to do, as you will see in a little bit. But there should be another ladder down here, inside one of these little holes. Miyazaki. Miyazaki, I see it. Okay. Ah. But whether or not this, like, this actually looks like it's made of wood. And it's kind of hard to tell, because, you know, wood and stone in this game kind of makes kind of the similar noise, I guess, but I'm assuming that this is made of wood. So I'm going to also assume that the tree that we actually see... Oh, there's the statue. So long, statue. And how'd that happen? It was me! But I'm assuming that how the trees, like the one near the Firelink Shrine, for example, the ones that we see are actually the result of these trees that are growing up out of the arch trees from their centers. Their big gullets kind of inflate whenever they do that, too. I probably should have let him do it one last time. But one thing about these guys, it's kind of unusual. They have little fins. Why would they have fins? And they also seem to have little bitty chicken legs. And I think the reason why they seem to have little chicken legs is because maybe it's another implication that they were things that evolved from the dragons themselves. And again, the game doesn't offer up any explanation whatsoever as to how we're getting things like the Gaping Dragon and, what are the other ones that are evolved? Like the dragons that we... Are those? I think that the dragon asses might be something that's also... I can't remember. There's one or two things that are said to be descendants of the dragons, but they're not actually dragons themselves. But I'm kind of assuming that the basilisks are sort of related to that. And how exactly they became descendants, I have no idea. Like, how do you evolve from a thing that's basically just stone and nothing else? I don't know. But maybe it has something to do with the nature of what happened whenever the Age of Fire got kickstarted. That maybe once they destroyed all of the dragons, maybe that did something... Dark Souls 3! Ooh! That maybe that did something that led to the formative stages of these creatures that we have now today. But again, these guys and things like the mushroom people are all creatures, and the clams are all things that are from the Greylands. They're Greyland creatures. And they do seem to have fins, even though we don't really encounter them any place that actually has water other than like the depths, maybe. Do we encounter them? I can't remember offhand. But they seem to have come from something that was supposed to swim at some point. But but maybe not very deep, considering that they have such small fins. But once we get down there, we'll see that there's a bit of water down inside of the Greylands that we can't trespass across. Okay. Let's see if I can get myself killed. Going down this last little part. There's, two different tiers to this thing. This is the second one. You can roll off early onto these little mushroom pads, by the way. And of course, I will point out that these are like giant mushrooms that are growing out of the walls, growing out of the side of the stone part of the tree, by the way. Again, wood, and that looks like it's stone. I think they have two different textures. This is more green. It looks like it actually has life. Whereas that over there just looks like maybe it is petrified. So, yeah. That's kind of how that's working. That is kind of how that is working. Working and twerking. But during the formative stages of whatever created these things in the first place, it does seem like one of the things that were first created as sort of primeval forms of life from the stone were these little mushrooms. Boop! Wonder what sound these things make. stone, actually. Or it bounces off like stone. Which could just mean that it's a generic thing that doesn't really have any primary setting to it. So I wouldn't read too much into it. You can never really be certain with these games. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Hello, sweetie. Remember them? Big, fat, ugly, stinky, stupid babies. And they're not making the noise. Make the noise. Oh, well. But, I forget what each one of these things are, but the gist of it is that they're all chunks. Like chunks and shards and stuff, so... Little bastard. You naughty, naughty mushroom. I probably should actually be using my shield since I bothered to equip it in the first place. But these guys, you really don't need it. It's kind of the weird thing about shields in this game. Is that the things that shields actually work on are usually things that you don't need to use them on in the first place. And just ever so often you'll come across something that is unfair enough that the shield is actually kind of effective. And it's one of those weird things. Again, with my shield complaints, they didn't quite implement them just the right way. And, by the way, I was working on my little design doc the other day. And I started thinking about games that had actually done this correct, and the original Bushido Blade actually does a really good job of sort of imitating how actual combat would be, other than a few ridiculous moves where they're, like, flying up into the sky and falling down and things like that. But otherwise, it did a pretty good job of it. By the way, notice how these guys have, like, blood on them? Which is kind of unusual because, why would they have blood on them? Because there's really nothing down here that's going to bleed, you would think. But I guess they're kind of just made for being up in the forest. And the fact that they're down here is kind of more of an afterthought, maybe. This camera's not helping me. They don't appreciate me slaughtering these babies for some reason. But you'd think that if these little baby mushrooms actually had concerned parents... Where am I? Oh, there I am. Ow! Son of a bitch. I'm probably gonna die from this. Shield, protect me from everything. Do they have split damage? No, they don't have split damage, but they can go right through all of my stamina. So yeah, shields aren't always effective in completely protecting you. What was I saying about the mushroom people, though? I can't remember offhand. I got so distracted by amusing myself with that. I don't really mind dying in situations like that. It's funny. Just that Bushido Blade is a pretty good example, because it does have, like, high, low, mid stances. And, like, if you attack from one direction, then you actually end up accidentally parrying the other person. You know, you can't really do a full, parry system in a video game, exactly, because it is hard as balls. Because there's things like, if someone is attacking you, and, yeah, you can, like, start to defend, but their wrist, like, twists in a slightly different way. In real life, you can actually look at their hand and be like, oh, he's doing this, and adjust on the move. Whereas in a video game, since everything is tied to, like, one button, then, you know, if you do one animation, then you're stuck to that animation. And I think that's where some crystal lizards are right here, by the way. So, you know, you can't really make any major adjustments in regards to that. Is this... I think this is the one with the ladder. Or maybe it's not at all. Maybe it is not at all. Maybe I'm a fool! I'm probably a fool. Where the hell is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, that's what I was looking for. I don't remember it being this difficult to find, though. Oh, this place is dangerous. And it seems like... Yeah, there's two of them. Okay. But this is the safest way down. I just wanted to make sure that I showed this. This is the reason why I took so long looking for the damn thing. And, of course, don't get petrified on the way down here. Because these things do respawn, of course. But, yeah, Bushido Blade's a pretty good example. Because it takes the basics of sort of melee combat, and barring the kind of the sillier examples, of course, does a pretty good job of trying to replicate that as best as it possibly can. I think it seems like they absolutely ruined Bushido Blade 2 because they decided this isn't enough of a video game. People don't like realism, so they tried to fuck it up in various ways, and they succeeded in fucking it up in various ways. Come here. No, don't do that. Go on, Inky. Don't appreciate you. It is a new... What do these things even do, you know? Like, what are the objectives of this basilisk in life? As the textures on the walls completely flip out. and things die above me. Like, they're turning people to stone. They can't eat them once they're stone. Or can they? I don't know. But, yeah, they're just video game enemies. But, yeah, if you want to check out something like that, Bushido Blade's a pretty good example. And actually getting that to work, like, doing that little design document, it's been a pain in the ass. Because, you know, it is very difficult to try to replicate that while also making it fun at the same time. And you... Like, actual melee combat with, like, swords and shields and stuff actually is really, really fucking fast. So people that are, well, it'd be too slow. Like, even this is very, very sluggish right here. If you're making, like, a video game that was, like, not that... even this is, like, really slow. But it would be going so fast that it would be almost impossible to track anything that was going on. But at the same time, you actually have to make it fair. Guys, really. Their only objective in life is to try to push you off the edge of things. I love that generic loon noise that they make. Makes no sense at all. Like, why are they making loon noises? Not lewd noises, like loon, like the bird. Like, that's just a stock noise that a loon makes. Really weird. Okay. What the hell are you guys doing? It's falling flat on your faces. All day long, all day, every day. Yes. Now for these guys. I'm not gonna mess around with these guys this time. I was kind of just fooling around last time. Mucking about, as it were. It is kind of unusual that these guys have little eyes, and later we are going to meet Elizabeth in the DLC, and she is basically one of these things. It's really hard to rationalize her existence, because we're going to meet her in the past. We're going to meet her in the past, but these guys seem like they're... Come on, roll. Roll! But these guys seem like they are more the primeval versions of her. You wouldn't think they would work in reverse, though. Like, she was someone that, or whatever it is, a he or whatever, is like an actual, you know, it's something, like she was formed from the formative stages whenever the first flame wreaked havoc on the stone trees, whatever the hell happened, that we're going to learn about in Dark Souls 3, woo. That somehow there used to be a race of her, and now there are these things. Whereas it makes more sense to me if it worked. He threw a little... Aw, that's cute. He's such a little loser. Fat, stinky, smelly, ugly babies. Honestly. It would make more sense if she actually evolved out of whatever these things are. And these are kind of like the primate versions of mushrooms. And that's why they're so aggressive and wild. And they don't really seem to have much intelligence about them. Whereas Elizabeth obviously does not have, like, limbs. She, you know, has speech and everything, but she doesn't move or anything like that. I don't know. Which came first, the chicken or egg? I have absolutely no idea. But anyways, the point I was trying to make here is that these things are, like, growing out of the walls. And this one seems to be trying to merge himself back into a wall. Let's not look at that. And these things do seem to be growing straight out of the... Actually, this texture looks like wood. And it sort of looks like they're blending together down here. Like, some parts look like they have this more mossy texture, whereas the other ones kind of look like they have this more generic, sort of implied stone texture that we find out in, like, the Blighttown outside, you know, stone version of this. So it does seem like they're actually growing directly out of the growing life, whatever these stems happen to be. Like, whenever we see the Bed of Chaos, like, we saw those big stone tendrils that were linking together with everything. Little rascal. Sneak up on me. Stealthy mushrooms. We saw all that sort of growing out into every direction. I guess the implication is that, like, these little bitty roots that seem to be coming out of nothing. Oh, weird. Are actually oh, there you are. Are actually what is indicating the spread of life, as the first flame spread its influence all over the world. And it does seem to be reaching up. And why exactly there is a floor inside of the Great Hollow here, I have no idea. Like, there's this one at the base, and then there's one way up top again. Although it has holes all over the place, so maybe there's not like an actual ground level. Maybe it's just, I don't know, it's something that grew out or something. I have no idea. I'm trying to rationalize this. But this is sort of the base level of this. the very end of our little trek down the Great Hollow. Just as long as you survive the big punchy mushroom men, who again have blood for no explicable reason. This does seem to be where the tree that we see above, like this isn't the one from Firelink, but it's another one. The one that we see at Firelink does purportedly come from a arch tree that was directly under us. This doesn't be where it actually grew out of. So maybe it is that once after the fight with the dragons, whatever they did exactly, they came into one of the arch trees and I don't know, maybe they planted a bone of a dragon, which we've known in the past, like the core of the iron golem. They can use that as a formative thing to create flesh or sort of artificial life of some kind. And maybe that's what they use to make these trees grow. Like maybe these are the remnants of dead dragons, quote-unquote dead dragons or something, that have been affected by the first flame. I have no idea. Those are just total guesses. But the gist of it is that this is something that actually grew up out of the base of the arch trees themselves. So even though up above we see the stone sort of blending into life, it does seem to, at its core, seems to be where it's actually coming from, the very base. And the tree bark, even though this is how tree bark looks, it almost looks like dragon scales in a way that they texture this, just because of how flaky it looks. This is total bullshit, though. Don't worry about that too much. You know the little ribs on the bottom of mushrooms? They feel really good, don't they? You ever try that? Just like take one of those little mushrooms and just rake your fingers across it gently? It feels really nice. It feels really nice. Yes. I appreciate how the bottom of their little feet kind of look like they almost pluck themselves out of the ground. Like these used to be their roots or something, and they just kind of rip themselves free. And their bodies themselves actually look like they had the texture of a burlap sack. Really weird. Gyrate, jiggle for me, yes, yes, oh yes. Ribbed from my pleasure. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be doing this. Alright. But joking aside, now we need to move forward. I don't need to do anything special, I don't think so. But just be aware of all the things that we've been confronting up towards now. The question of why exactly did they attack the stone dragons in the first place? How does the first flame work? And all this other stuff. And the beginning of the game, the opening cinematic, the Grey Lands. Like, what happened to the Grey Lands? All these questions sort of have their answers and even more questions right past this little tunnel. And it is interesting that there is a wall of fog here. Even though it isn't quite a wall of fog. Because we're not going to be entering a boss fight or anything. How exactly these fog walls work, I don't know. They seem to exist anytime that there's a major sort of transition from one area to another. Of course, they obviously are in front of bosses, but we've encountered them before. Like, remember the mystery key that we plucked from a corpse? The one that we used to rescue Lautrec if we don't have the master key. There was one there that went to seemingly from just one area of the undead bird to another. So that's like the most trivial one that I can think of. But even that was sort of a major transition from one area of the game to another. So they do seem to be placed in areas of major, areas of power. So maybe there's something that are natural, or maybe it's something that was actually placed artificially to seal off entire areas of the world, to ensure that people could not go past them or actually leave them. Because, unlike 2, we can't actually go through them backwards, I don't think. There might be 1 or 2 that we can do that in this game, but I think there are 1 or 2 that we can actually do that. But most of them, if you get to the backside of them, you can't actually go through them. You have to go through them one direction. So maybe that's their purpose. That's my best guess. I don't know. But that's my best guess, that maybe there was something they were artificially placed. Which wouldn't make sense for this, because if we go through this, we re-enter an area of the world that has not been seen by humans or gods or witches or Nito for a very long time. Do I have this up? Turn that shit all the way up. Oh, well, this is embarrassing. But you'll notice that there did seem to be a... Huh. Maybe I'll move forward a little bit. I know the music seems kind of... Oh. It's not really cooperating, is it? But you'll notice it does get louder in places. Like, there's obviously an audio placement point for this in-game that I'm either missing or moving away from. Because I guess they assume that you walk out here and then immediately hit this, and then the music pops off immediately. But this is one of my favorite areas of the game. Let's turn that a little more bit. I can't even hear myself. Sorry, but I can't even really hear myself speaking right now. But the music for this area is awesome. And this is a pretty awesome area itself. Because this is the opening cinematic. We are in the Greylands right now. And remember at the very beginning of that opening cinematic, pygmies approached the first flame and found... It says they found souls within the fire. But we learned from Quilana that, like the witch, for example, at least found it near the first flame. So I guess it's like, I don't know, just radiated or something. But it came from the first flame, is how it seems to be the implication. But the pygmies found those. And for some reason, rather than building a civilization under all that, they decided to instead go up. They wanted to go up. Or maybe there was something about the nature of the Greylands themselves that was preventing them from doing something. So they took it upon themselves to actually attack the stone dragons, which is interesting because it's not like the stone dragons had their own civilization. They didn't have really anything. They were just being stone dragons. But for some reason, Gwen specifically, and Nito, and even the witches, Nito specifically is the most unusual, were motivated to actually take on the stone dragons, destroy them, so that they could do something. And maybe that something was to create this... I don't know, maybe it was that the stone dragon's existence itself was somehow inhibiting the power of the first flame. Or inhibiting the power of the witches. Maybe they were the ones that were in charge of creating life that allowed them to extend forward into this Asgardian world above us. Maybe that's how it worked, I don't know. But the stone dragons did seem to have something that was actually impeding the progress of the pygmy races. And so, everything here was basically incinerated, as we learned in the opening cinematic. Although here, it doesn't really look like anything has been burned. Like maybe the Greylands have actually recovered. Or maybe what we learned in the opening cinematic was mostly a lie. Like, it's really not clear. Although that over there does seem like it may have been scorched at some point. It is really difficult to tell. But here, we do see, like, the green of the moss, and later we're going to see a few enemies. And over there, of course, we see the Hydra. There does seem to be some elements of life here in the Greylands. So maybe the war against the dragons during the formative stages of the Age of Fire were actually for the purposes of creating life and expanding this notion of life versus death. And the dragons were somehow impeding this. And down here we also see life and death occurring unnaturally in the Greylands. And it is very gray in many ways. It's kind of, in the distance we can actually see like the mist is sort of greenish and bluish in some ways, which seems to indicate some sort of particulate matter that's actually organic floating around in the air. And the waters themselves are very blue. And water that does not have any form of life inside of it typically is not really this color. Although it is becoming very black, so maybe it's, blue does fade into black very easily more than other colors. So maybe that's just the implication that they're trying to create. That maybe the waters themselves aren't really waters exactly. That they're extending far below into an abyss. And remember whenever we destroy things like the Black Knights, for example, whenever we shatter them, and they're nothing but souls instead of armor at this point, then they sort of fade away into this watery, sort of soul-like texture. So maybe the implication is that there is something tied with the notion of water and soul energy, and just that. I don't know. It's very hard to place. So whenever we go down into this water, we of course will die. But maybe we're actually entering into the abyss. And you may think that's silly, but I don't know. It's not without some sort of established lore, because think about this. What is above us? That is not sky. It is not sky, even though we see, like, light piercing the heavens. Like, there's nothing above us. Absolutely nothing. There's no land. Like, this is sky. Like, we can see, even though it's shrouded in fog, it is sky and light. But we know we just came through, if I can get a good enough angle. We will once we get over there, if I remember to look backwards. We came from this thing, and even above this, we don't see any land. We don't see anything. And even if there was land above this, then how the hell would it be supported by anything? So, whenever I've been referring to the land that we were in, Lordran and everything, as being sort of an Asgardian world, this is what I'm referring to. This idea that once we go down here, we are in a completely different sort of universe that seems to have a new, non-Euclidean, sort of organization with the world that we were in before. Like, we go above this, we're going to be in a completely different plane of existence that doesn't really seem to have much of a tie to anything else. Like, maybe, I don't want to say different dimension, but Miyazaki does seem to like this, and he likes a little bit too much in Bloodborne because he does that religiously. But here in Dark Souls, the world is organized like this. Like, if we pass through these trees that have these ancient forms of life growing out of them, and around them even, then if we keep going up, then eventually we wind up in a completely different world that seems to be completely disconnected from this world. So what if we go down through the waters? Will we end up in whatever it was that the pygmies were originating from? Because again, there doesn't seem to be anything really under this. Like, we see over here, if my burp, oh, it's still heavy. Like, we can see the ground blending off into nothingness. Almost like, I mean, look at this. Like, the reflection that's overtaking it, but it does seem like it's just fading off into nothing. Which is just how water works, I guess. But you can also view it as going off into a completely different world, a different dimension. Which, the reason why I really like this whole area is that it's very sort of mystical or spiritual, however you want to look at it, without being overtly, nonsensical. Like, it still sort of makes sense, but it also doesn't really make much sense at all. Very unusual. Shabams! And even whenever you shatter souls, it does seem to have that sort of floaty, almost watery texture to it, which I think is what it's supposed to be trying to imply whenever you kill things like the knights, even though those do seem a bit more watery for some reason. And even though this bonfire is already lit, we light it again. Weird. I probably shouldn't have rested. Hope they don't vanish. Okay, good. But this is a bonfire. And again, anytime that we see a bonfire, it seems to be that the ones that are unlit because originally they lost their kindling from the era of the original era of the undead. Like, whenever Gwyn established the Age of Fire, there was great prosperity, the gods were at the height of their power, and I'm guessing that's what Dark Souls 3 is going to be. It's going to be a prequel, if I had to guess. And at some point, they figured out that they could use human beings that are inflicted with the undead curse, whenever the undead curse first had its first time around, to sort of ignite these bonfires that could be used to replenish the abilities of humans. And once that Age of Fire came to, well, not came to an end, but once it was rekindled, the power of the undead curse waned, and as a result, these fires became unlit. That's my guess, anyways, as to how all this worked. Which is unusual, because it does seem to imply that either a human did this or a god did this. Usually whenever we see them, it seems to be implied that the gods are the ones that encourage this behavior, that the Church of Thurland was the establishment that actually encouraged this behavior, sacrificing people in order to create these bonfires. So why exactly the Church of Thurland would have anything to do with anything that was going on down here, it's not really clear. Although Gwyn and Havel, for example, did seem to be friends from long, long ago, back whenever the war against the dragons was still happening. So maybe it is that that humans and gods and so forth were actually cooperating during the fight against the dragons, although we don't see any evidence of that whatsoever during the opening cinematic. And again, maybe the opening cinematic is mostly bullshit, and that's just the lore that has been passed down by the church over eons. And it is actually based on something completely different that happened that we don't know anything about. But that's all kind of beside the point. Because once again, Dark Souls is not really that kind of game. It's not Bloodborne. It's not going to obsess over, you know, is this a world within a world? Is it a dream within a dream? It doesn't really matter. Like, it's there, but that's not the point. This is the point. These little tiny moments between people. And what has happened between these two people? Between mother and mother and daughter. Between father and daughter.
My father. Always following me. I will return to Catherine. You are completely. I can hardly return the favor, but please accept it. Of no use to me.
One of the very few Titanite slabs that we can actually get in the game. You can farm them, of course, but as far as just getting them through quote-unquote legit means, not that I'm implying farming is not legit, but you know what I mean. Getting it via scripted events. I think there's like one of like 2 or something, and you can pick up another one off the ground or something like that. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way. And while I'm thinking about it, let's lower the volume on this music because I couldn't hear a word that she said almost. As awesome as that music is, we need to keep everything level. So, even though she said, you know, if my father goes hollow, then I can at least kill him again. Which she has done. But now that she's done it, like, she's not even equipping a weapon now. Like, she seems to have completely given up. I guess they couldn't just show the weapon on the ground or something. I'm not really sure. But it seems like the fact that she's not holding a weapon does make it more clear that she is forlorn. Like, this is, even though it was something that she was prepared for, it seems like she wasn't quite as prepared as she thought that she was. So, even though this doesn't really make any sense because her father is hollow, and really, he should be reappearing at that bonfire, like, right now, she has killed her father again. She had to put him down. Even though that doesn't really make any sense, because if he came down here for one last adventure, why would she have to come down here to put him out of his misery? Whenever, he wasn't really bothering anyone. Like, he was down here, but there's no one down here to hurt. There are no humans. There are no gods. There's nothing down here anymore. All the, pygmy creatures that got souls went up above into the world that we just came from. Or maybe it's that she fought him down here, and this it just so happens to be where they, eventually ended their fight. There's no real way of knowing exactly. Why exactly he came down here in the first place is not really clear. But if someone were to have one last great adventure, it seems like this would be a pretty good place to have it. Here at the beginning of absolutely everything. And if you don't dispel the walls in between, you know, here and there, they still get down here somehow. Although I guess it's just one of those things where you're really not supposed to think about it too much. More to the point, instead of worrying about that, we have the, you know, it's just a daughter and her father. You know, she's destroyed her own father. That's more what we're supposed to be focusing on. By the way, one thing I think that Bloodborne did do better than all the other Souls games is its voice acting is amazing. Like, I guess this is more Frog Nation more than Miyazaki or FromSoft. But they did an exceptional job with all, like, even though the NPCs are kind of just bare bones, like, they're very two-dimensional. They do, like, one thing, and then they just keep being that two-dimensional quality that they have, like, they're the bigot, or they're the lonely lady, or, you know, they're the crazy person. And then they kind of just stay that way, and then nothing happens, and after, like, meeting them 2 or 3 times, then they just die, or they kind of go away, or they just keep doing it the whole game, and nothing really ever changes. But whenever they actually talk, they really deliver their lines very well. Frog Nation did an amazing job directing their voice actors in that game. Not that I'm implying that they're doing a poor job in the Souls games, but The conveyance is way better in Bloodborne, I think. But in regards to her, obviously, she is completely broken up about her father. Dear father. So she's going back to Katarina now. I'm not quite sure if she was ever undead in the first place. I don't think that she was, which makes her very, very brave for coming to Lordran, where you can easily get your ass killed just like that. By, like, getting trapped against a wall with a bunch of mushroom people while you're talking. Like, that can easily happen. So the idea of just a human coming here to take care of business from their father that used to be human, that they really don't have to worry anything about, really speaks volumes about her character. Because if she was undead, then there's no way that she would probably be let back in Katarina in the first place, if you think about it. Because once you become undead, you're pretty much chased out of human civilization. Because the undead curse became such a big problem. Like, the thing that we never see is all the civilizations crumbling because, you know, there's basically zombies all over the fucking place. Like, people are dying and they can't bury them because they're still alive. It became a really big problem. So once you come to Lordran, that's pretty much it. You are in Lordran forever. So I'm assuming that she's actually still human. And it also speaks volumes about her character, that even though she is human, and really she doesn't have to worry about her father anymore because her father became undead. And she did say that he has been killed once before, so that's how we know that he is undead. That even knowing that, she decided to deliver her mother's last words to her father, and even take care of business by finally putting him down for good. Even though that ended up driving him hollow in the first place. You really have to wonder how exactly she feels, knowing that the last words that she had to deliver to her father in the first place are what ended up, as far as she knows, driving him completely over the edge. Like, she doesn't know that what we did. Like, we've been resolving all of his issues in the first... And this is really weird. Is that a scabbard that's coming out of her own body? It's probably just something that's hanging off of her belt. I can't really tell. Although it is weird. It's like a... That would have to be... I don't know. It's like a small broadsword or some kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not going to worry too much about it. But she doesn't know about the fact that we're basically responsible. Like, we have solved so many of his problems that we kind of drove him over the edge. As I've talked about before, we kind of made him give up on life because he felt like his life was no longer worth living. And once she finally delivered that news, maybe to her it must seem like she was responsible in the first place. So a lot going on in regards to her characterization and his characterization. And, yes, of course, whenever I was making my allusions to the NFL and athletes and things like that, I didn't mean to directly imply that they're all committing suicide just because of, you know, losing everything. I was more talking about Sigmire and just using that as reference. Of course, whenever people from the NFL and, like, wrestlers, for example, commit suicide, often it's because, you know, they've had so many, like, you know, experiences of head trauma, you know, collisions, and, you know, all sorts of accidents and things in their professional career that they end up being very unstable mentally in the first place. But it's not like that's the only cause of it, is what I was getting at. But yeah, just be aware that whenever, like, wrestlers and things, like Chris Benoit, for example, like, killed his whole family because he was basically insane. And he was basically insane because he had the equivalent of, like, like, I forget what the number was. It was like someone in his 70s with Alzheimer's. Like, his brain was so messed up from all of that, the headbutting and colliding with things over the years. And all of the chemical abuse that they have to go through in order to keep their bodies looking the way that they do. Which is something that they've tried to push down over years. So yeah, Sigmire is basically Christopher Benoit. Like, Benoit, one of the things that pushed him over the edge was the death of Eddie Guerrero. And whenever that happened, he became very unstable. And just over time, I think like a year later, I think it was, maybe it was even less than a year, that's whenever the murders happened. And it's kind of, I guess, kind of the same with Sigmire. Not necessarily the whole head injury and whatnot, but just the idea of that he has been driven to this point, both by his physical experiences and his mental experiences. And we're just going to leave you be for a while. And now I have to deal with this stupid fucking Hydra. I enjoy talking about these things, but, this Hydra is dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. And I'm going to have to deal with the one... We haven't actually seen a Hydra yet. We've seen one, but I actually haven't fought one yet. Because there's also one down in the area that I'm going to save for the DLC. That'll probably be the episode after this one. Come on. Come on. He has to waddle his ass over here. It's difficult. I'll try to use the shield. We'll see how this works. Oh, it actually did work, to my surprise. But basically the way to deal with these things, and these are very aggressive, is you basically just have to get it to, you have to get close enough to where its heads will do this little attack that will slam them into the ground, and then you have to run over and attack their heads, if I can keep the game from locking onto them. And you have to be so close to the edge that it's very easy to fall off into the water. And their animations are not always kind of clear what's going on, so it's not really absolutely certain if you're hitting them most of the time. You can also shoot them with arrows or shoot them with magic. But it's very easy to accidentally miss them, especially whenever their heads are clipping into the terrain. I wonder if I should show that. Let's try to do that. Hold on. Sorry, Hydra. But if you run away from this thing, it does follow you, and it seems like it has a unique attack where it actually tries to chase you down. Let's go ahead and pick up this stuff. There's a couple other things down there that I need to pick up as well, but so I'll have to go back. But I wanted to see if I could trigger him to following me and doing that little special cutie move of his. Alright, come on, sweetie. Don't just blow water at me. Actually do the thing. The thing, do the thing. Do the thing, come on. Or is he just gonna do this? Maybe I actually have to run. I didn't want to go too far because of all these damn clams all over here. There we go. But he does that. Then whoosh! Woo! Whee! It looks terrible! His main body does sort of look like the, the demon from Demon Souls, the, Storm King. That's what I'm thinking of. Whoops, I guess you... Well, you don't like the fact that I'm fighting him right now? And by the way, notice that these guys are very, very colorful. Like, we couldn't really... Whoops. We couldn't really see it whenever we fought them the first time around. But these guys are very, very colorful. Maybe because they're imbued with lots and lots of life. I have no idea. And let's go ahead and finish off this other clam, just to be safe. And they have little yellow booties. They really look nice. Like, they really do look like sea creatures now. Whereas even the ones that were sort of near Seath, I guess it's just because of the filter of the area, because I think they have the exact same texture. But even they look a lot more gray. And again, I think it's just because of that texture. Of course, they drop Twinkling Titanite. There he goes again! Whee! Oh, that looks absolutely terrible. And notice on his backside, he does sort of have the same sort of vine-like shit going on that we saw growing out of the trees. So maybe he is linked with the trees and what actually happened to them. Or maybe not at all. Maybe he is also a descendant of the dragons. It isn't clear what exactly the Hydras even are in the first place. But since we actually see one up above in the Darkroot Garden area, yeah, it's not like one of these things climbed its way out of the Greylands and got its way up there. Come on. It's not like that happened, so I'm assuming that somehow these things are created. And that it was created, oh goodness. That it was created up above the same way that it was created down here. And however that is, I don't know. Maybe it had babies and the baby climbed its way up here, I don't know. Or maybe it's just an enemy, they wanted to reuse it 2 times. That's actually probably what happened. That's totally what happened. It's funny that I still have Undead Rapport down here. Let's see how much damage it does whenever it hits me. Not too much damage. Let's finish off with arrows. Not going to trust. There it goes. Okay. It's death animation. You don't have to cut off all of its heads. And it seems like you can only cut off a maximum of... I forget how many heads it has, but it seems like it ends up like you have to have at least 2 of them or something left. It's been a long time since I even thought about it. Well, that's him down. Now there's really nothing going on in Ash Lake. That's pretty much it. That's every enemy in this entire zone, practically. Except for one little thing that we had to take care of in a bit. But let's run over here, and I think this is just a dragon scale, but I figured I'd show it off just for the hell of it. But that's pretty much it. That's everything in regards to Ash Lake. Just the question of whether exactly what we saw in the original opening cinematic is dragon scale, of whether what we saw in the opening cinematic was actually true or not is really unusual. And here we can see some little tiny trees actually beginning to grow up here. So maybe, I don't know, maybe life began down here and grew up, or maybe life is actually going down. Although I'm really more of a fan of the notion that after beating the dragons, for whatever reason they did it, they decided to do something. And I'm guessing the witches were responsible for most of this. And they used the trees to actually grow up into the world that we live in today. And the trees that we... Ooh, goodness. The trees that we see up there today are the extensions of what's left of the arch trees. Very unusual how all this is actually organized. And the question of why exactly they attacked the stone dragons in the first place is also very unusual. Because again, the stone dragons weren't really doing anything to impede their progress. It's like us... Like, if we were a tribe of humans that, like, journeyed over the mountains, and we went over the mountains, and then we found just, like, a big, like, a forested area that had a bunch of rocks inside of it. And our leader was like, destroy the rocks! Like, why? Why would it matter that we destroy the rocks? It doesn't make any sense. And you can tell this place isn't exactly positioned perfectly, because this guy's just kind of just floating in nothing. Whether this is the corpse of a god or a witch or a human, we don't know. But all the same, he drops a dragon scale. So I guess we can imply that this is someone that was left over, that died during the war against the dragons in the first place. And I need to point this out just to point it out. We even got this skull. Hell if I know what it's for. Yep, here's the skull. Here it is. Plague, what is the skull? I don't know. I really don't know. Its texture is terrible, though. It's probably a very, like, look how bad, like, the polygons. Oh, it's terrible. Like, this is very poorly modeled. So it kind of makes me think that this was something that they modeled very early on and they just had it. So they decided, just throw it down there, why not? But people always talk about this skull because it looks like nothing in the game. It doesn't really look like a dragon skull exactly. It maybe sort of does, but it looks very, very human. Like, it looks like the skull, like even the giants that we have met, like the giant blacksmith, for example, is this size. And that's the biggest we ever see a humanoid creature. That maybe sometime in the very distant past there was another race that we never saw. And they have horns even. This thing has horns. Although this is not really how horns work in regards to skulls and stuff, but I know it's just one of those weird things. Like, there's no explanation for it, there's no hint for it, there's no established lore that would even lead us to make any assumptions about the skull in the first place. It's just here. And it has fangs. Oh, and it has a humanoid face. My best guess is that this is supposed to be implied to be the skull of a dragon, and they just did a very poor job of it. That's my best guess. I really do not know. And that's especially strange because dragons don't really have skulls exactly, because again, they're stone creatures. Whenever we see them being blown apart by lightning in the opening cinematic, they don't lose scales off their body, their whole face shatters off. Like they're completely made out of stone. Even though we see them, the game says they have stone scales. But maybe it's just like their exterior body and their interior body is also made of stone. And again, I've talked about this before in regards to Seath. Like, Seath seems to be inverted. Like, he has an interior, like, he has soul crystals. Like, he is stone within his soul, as it were. Like, if we look inside of his body, he's made of meat. But he also has, like, this fragmented, stony-looking blood. And whenever he uses his magic, his magic sort of spreads in this stone-like pattern as well. And we need to be careful in here. Wow! That was some fucking airtime. Come over here, sweeties. It's pretty easy to get yourself stonified in here as well. Again, I'm not saying petrified because that implies something a little bit different. Okay. And we need to be careful of this little gentleman. And again, I will point out there are basilisks and mushroom people down here. This is as far as he goes, I think. Yeah, I think he wants to leash back. No? He actually was back here? Huh. Thank you, iframes. And they do have poise, so you can eventually shatter that. Gonna drop anything for me? No? Oh, well. But it is interesting that the ones up above seem to drop gold pine resin like crazy. But the ones down here don't seem to drop out at all, or at least their drop rate is way lower. Maybe that's just a farming thing, like they don't want you to have it too easy down here. Because that's the only way of getting gold pine resin for free. I don't know. It's really, really strange. Anyways, this is another arch tree that we're actually in. We need to get that thing. But this one seems to be, I don't know, this one actually has like a roof, just a straight up roof, and there's no tree growing out of the middle of this one. So whether that's unique or not, I don't know. But we come out here and need to be very careful, because it's very easy to get yourself knocked off the edge. Whoa! And that looks much different whenever he does it out here. It doesn't look as gray. It looks almost whitish. Really strange, but it's still the same thing. And there's more, yeah, more clams over there. That's what I'm looking at. But there's one last thing that we need to get, and it's right down here. And this is very difficult to make, just because it's so easy to accidentally slide off this model and into the water, which might happen. Come on. Miyazaki. 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 I don't know why they do that. The Souls games, like I've said in the past, Demon Souls has terrible platforming. It doesn't have platforming because you can't jump. Shut up. Demon Souls does have platforming. If you're moving from one platform to another, and one of the goals of it is to make sure that you don't die in the process, it has platforming. It doesn't matter if you don't have a single button dedicated to jumping from one to the other. That doesn't make a platformer. Hell's wrong with you people. You people that I'm making up. And people have said it to me before anyways. But I don't know why in the world they seem to go out of their way to make those little platform sections as bad as they are. Like, the point of that, if you're going to have terrible platforming, is whether you can actually see it and think, oh, I need to drop down to that. The problem shouldn't actually be in actually landing on the damn thing. Anyways, Miracle Great Magic Barrier. And it is important that we actually find this down here. Oh, Great Magic Barrier. Because remember, the Magic Barrier itself. This is Magic Barrier, the normal version. Miracle of Bishop Havel the Rock. So Havel the Rock was a bishop of the Church of Thurland. Cover body and defensive magic coating. This coating greatly boosts magic defense, assisting warriors who must face the magic which Bishop Havel countered so proficiently. Again, whenever the war against the dragons happened, they weren't fighting against magic users, which is one of the reasons why this is so strange to me. The dragons didn't have magic, as far as we know, unless they were able to breathe magic on us. Which, like, the drakes in the Valley of the Drakes can breathe lightning at us, even though, why would they breathe lightning whenever they're weak against lightning? Don't worry about it. So maybe it is that the dragons actually had some sort of intrinsic magical properties about them that we don't really know about. Which would go hand in hand with the idea of Seath being inverted. That maybe, you know, he has flesh made of this sort of magical, crystalline soul nonsense. And he's looking for stone scales that he can't have because he's kind of twisty, topsy-turvy. So maybe the dragons breathe magic at some point? I don't know. And Seath also breathes... And Seath... You notice that Seath breathes curse. Like, whenever he breathes that shit on us, it curses us. And the spell that imitates it says it loses its ability to curse. So he breathes cursing, like he breathes stone. Whereas the dragons, I guess, would breathe magic. Like, again, it's inverted. That's my best guess. So apparently the dragons at some point breathe magic, so that's why there are magic barriers. Magic barrier miracles in existence. But great magic barrier. Miracle of Bishop Havel the Rock. Cover body and powerful, deaf magic coating. Havel the Rock, an old battlefield compatriot, and this is where I'm getting the idea that he helped in the fight against the dragons, of Lord Gwyn, was the sworn enemy of Seath the Scaleless. He despised magic, and made certain to devise means of counteraction. One of the reasons why Seath is linked to magic isn't not because he necessarily breathed magic, it's because he was so invested in trying to figure out what the relationship between stone scales and magical ability and immortality versus undeath and all these things, how all that worked together. He was so invested in it that he became an expert in magic in the first place. So maybe it is that he became a sworn enemy of Seath after the destruction of all the other dragons, or maybe he was a sworn enemy before then. We really don't have enough information to say what exactly that relationship was like, or why that he had that sort of antagonism against Seath in the first place. But Seath obviously did not really think too much of humans, considering that he's abducting so many of them. So maybe that's the reason why Havel did not like him in the first place. Again, that whole thing, Havel's relationship with the church and the occult, because there is a sort of, because, you know, the relationship that we see with the key that we get from the stone blacksmith near the Moonlight Butterfly boss is also related to the occult, because the occult seems to be related to the stone blacksmiths themselves, because they were trying to steal something from Nito in order to figure out the source of immortality itself. This is a really, really complicated subplot that we really don't have anywhere near enough information about, because the occult people seem to have been obsessing over finding out how to become immortal, Seath seemed to be trying to figure out how to become immortal, and Havel hated Seath, but he also worked with the church as a bishop, so maybe there was, but he also, the occult people seem to be working against the gods, and the church itself is allied with the gods and serve the gods. So there's a really complicated tangle of interests going on there that we don't know anything about. But the fact that we are able to find... Actually, did it actually outright say that? Because, yeah, it's just Miracle Bishop Havel the Rock. So whether or not Havel actually developed these things or not, we don't really know. But it is interesting that we find just a random corpse here that happens to have it. So some people might say, oh, this is Havel, and the ones that we meet up above are actually his servants. I doubt it. Some people say that the person that we fight, that everyone assumes to be Havel because he's so fucking strong, was not actually Havel. It was just some random guy. I really don't see what that adds to the plot, but, you know, it's possible, I guess. But I'm going to assume that this was one of the people that were fighting against the dragons, and he just so happened to die in here for some reason? I don't know, it's not explained. I imagine he's just placed here because, hey, it'd be hard to get, and people can look up and see it, and that's the only logic to it, so I wouldn't read too much into it. But it does seem like the humans did fight alongside the gods against the dragons. That does seem to be the implication, which is fairly interesting, because it does imply that there was a relationship there, and, that the opening cinematic was not really wrong so much as it didn't give any information at all about the humans' participation in this. Just the furtive pygmy, the first human. So apparently, the furtive pygmy was busy at work fucking all those zombie pygmies and making more humans in the process behind the scenes. Well before the gods decided to do anything about the dragons. Drop anything? More twinkling time. You really don't need. Okay, whatever. I was hoping he was going to drop another one of those skulls. Maybe I could have lead it off into another thing, but it's really not that important. But here we have, this is the only one that's kind of unique. That this one does look like it may have been burned at some point. It doesn't have any singe marks or anything, but it does look like it has been shattered. And why would wood be shattered unless it was physically attacked? And it does seem to have another tree growing out of it, which is unusual. So I guess this used to be a really big arch tree that was destroyed, and at some point, I don't know, maybe the witches did something that caused the growth of this bigger one outside of it, or inside of it. Again, it's not clear, we just don't have enough information, sadly. But we go down the windy little sand road down here to find something very, very special. And by the way, it is interesting that it seems to be like it is implied that the gods and the witches and so forth all use that tree over there, which we can finally see, to travel up through the clouds into the sky and into the world that they created above all of us. Again, that is really fucking weird. But don't worry about it, don't worry about it. And that one over there is also shattered. It does seem to have been one of the trees that they destroyed, the witches destroyed with their pyromancy. And they just please ignore the terrible texturing over here, because it's clipping through the effect that they're trying to create with the sky, so that's the reason why that's happening. It probably is less obvious on consoles. But it is interesting that this is the world that they apparently lived in. Maybe each one of these trees is something that they use to go up. But it seems like this would be a very poor area to fight in. Like, whenever you're throwing lightning bolts up at the sky against the dragons, what the hell are you standing on? Just this tiny, tiny little bed of sand? And that's it? It does seem like the Greylands is made almost completely out of water. Whereas in the opening cinematic, it was made almost completely out of nothing but stone. So maybe the water that we're seeing here is actually something that happened that was fairly recent. That maybe this was created because of a, life or something. I don't know. But let's not worry about that. Let's worry about our trip down memory lane to find ourselves one of... Actually, no, there's only one dragon that we actually meet in the entire game. Even this one is a descendant of a dragon. Down the yellow brick road. And don't trip off the edges, because you can die very easily. This road, it doesn't look like this road was constructed or something, which is fairly unusual. And we find here one of the dragons. If we'll open up his damn wings. Come on, you fucking asshole! Tolerating your existence only briefly. Some people like to say, oh, one of his horns is broken off. And originally in the design doc, Havel's weapon was actually called the dragon's horn, not the dragon's tooth. So actually his weapon is actually this guy's horn, and he's actually a servant of the dragons! That's not true at all, because you can see his horn is not broken off, it's just curved behind his head. Don't ask me why it's curved behind, why one of his horns is curved behind his head, I have no idea. But I will point out this guy kind of has kind of a humanoid-looking face, but obviously nowhere near big enough to explain away that skull that we find over there. But the little windy road takes us down here to pray to one of the dragons, so this is where you enter the Dragon Covenant, if you're wondering about that, which I don't know why anyone would, because why the hell would you want to be a stinky old dragon? But I do kind of like this guy's design, because he doesn't look like just a big dumb lizard. Like, he almost looks like a big long-necked ape creature with horns. It's really bizarre looking. So, dragons are kind of okay whenever you at least make them interesting looking. Like, the Gaping Dragon is one of my favorite boss designs. Looks amazing. Excellent looking design. Because he doesn't look like just a big dumb lizard with wings. If you're gonna take this tired old trope of dragons, oh, the big lizard beats fire. If you're gonna do that, at least make the damn thing interesting looking. And this guy is pretty interesting looking. But all the same, he's still a dragon. And that is intolerable, as we look at his big fluffy tail. So inviting. So very inviting. And just like a lot of the bosses in this game, if you can manage to cut off his tail, you get a weapon! And the weapon is apparently supposed to be his tail. And even though we do chop off this guy's tail, he doesn't really seem to care. And by the way, let's take a look. He does also seem to have sort of a meaty interior. So apparently this guy, either the stone dragons actually were not made of stone, or this guy is not really one of the ancient stone dragons. Let's find out, shall we? Okay, if I can find it. I always like doing this little lead. Let's find out. But then it takes like 10 seconds, or 15, or 30 seconds to actually find the weapon. It's going to be with the great swords, but I have to slow down because the game accelerates so quickly. Not the great axe. For God's sakes. There. No, that's a Grave Lord sword. Oh, for fuck's sake. Miyazaki. Miyazaki. Dragon Greatsword. It is an ultra greatsword. This sword, one of the rare dragon weapons, apparently it realizes that there are dragon weapons, came from the tail of the stone dragon of Ash Lake, descendant of the ancient dragons. So even though this thing is considered to be a stone dragon with stone exterior, it apparently is one of the descendants of the ancient dragons. Again, whether or not the opening cinematic is true or not, and the dragons were actually stone beings that were just made of stone or not, we really don't know. It could be that there were actually living creatures, and at some point in history, they were sapient, and there was some sort of falling out between them and the gods, and that was what incited the war against them. We don't know. Dark Souls 3, everyone. Just wait for it. Let's ruin the mystique of this game by having a sequel. But maybe it is that they were stone, and just something happened, which created this sort of bed of life that gave spawn from stone of all these living creatures, which we kind of saw evidence of in the Izalith area. So maybe he's a descendant of the ancient dragons in the sense that he was sort of formed from the stone remains of what they used to be. Like, they weren't actually, like, mounting each other and thrusting like wild beasts of the Serengeti and spawning like this guy as the result. Maybe he's a descendant in the sense that he was magic or something. Its great mystical power will be unleashed when wielded with two hands. Amazing. Simply amazing. I guess I should actually show the fucking thing. But again, souls are linked with magic. And what do the dragons breathe? Magic. What do they seem to be made out of? Stone, but they seem to breathe magic. Try to make any sense out of that. That you possibly can. I can wield this with two hands. Oh man, I move slow. R1. And R2. Yeah, it's one of those things. I really wish that... Again, I'm plugging my little design document that will never see the light of day. But one of the things I would love to do is to be able to exchange abilities like that. Like, my idea is... I took this from Vagrant Story, but you can disassemble any weapon into... What the hell was I doing? Oh yeah, I was trying to go back to Listener. I would love to be able to disassemble any weapon into, like, blade, pommel, hilt. And, like, say the pommel might carry the special ability of that weapon. And the blade would carry, like, the animation moveset because of the damage type it carries. And the hilt would do something else, like carry stats or something like that. And then if you like that big ability that we just did, but you don't want it to be tied to a greatsword, like you want it in, like, an estoc or something weird, then you can just take the pommel from that weapon and attach it to an estoc, and it would do, like, a much smaller version of it or something like that. Or maybe it would gain some other transitory power. I would really like it if you could do that. Because weapons like that are interesting, but they're kind of locked so heavily into stats that, you know, you'd have to be a very specific build to use it. And even then, the weapon itself is not particularly useful because it's so damn slow. But as far as the balancing of this game, of course, that's the reason why it has that ability, because it's so slow. So, the way that it works in this game, you wouldn't be able to switch it from weapon to weapon because that would be incredibly unbalanced. But for making a game on its own, you know, I would aim to be able to do things like that. But remember earlier I was talking about even if you bring a homeward bone, it can be difficult to get back to the surface. And that is because once you get out of that tree, even if you sat down at that first bonfire before we went down, you can set at the bonfire over there, accidentally, or you can come over here and say, "Oh, a bonfire! I'll light it!" Oops! because it was already lit. So if you come here very early in the game, you can accidentally sit down at this, and then you realize, oh shit, I'm going to have to go all the way back. Which is a big pain in the ass. And nothing special to see here. He doesn't have any dialogue. You can just come here and just bow down and just enter the Covenant. And he seems to be fairly indifferent to this. He doesn't have any dialogue. He doesn't really seem to give a shit, but he's here. So maybe this trail got here because human beings built it down here. Maybe that's the reason why there are bonfires down here. That maybe these things are, again, tied with the occult. Not the occult upgrade path or anything like that, but, you know, the people that were delving into the occult. Trying to figure out how to live forever. Via means of either irritating Nito and begging him, show us how to do this, Nito. And Nito's like, nah, I'm trying to watch Skeleton Adventures in here. Nah. And he rattles his bones at him. Or going this route and trying to gain immortality by transforming yourself into a dragon, which is what the Dragon Covenant is all about. And I guess I might show that off in the next part. But for the time being, that's quite enough of all this nonsense. And I will just mention briefly that it is interesting that this bonfire is already lit. Which seems to indicate that it was placed here after the beginning of the latest undead curse cycle. Whenever the new wave of undead became, or, you know, started to exist. So, all the occult things that have been happening apparently have never stopped. And maybe that's the reason why that they had to abandon Anor and so forth. Because the occult practices that had started happening during the falling out against the gods during the first Age of Fire, or the height of the Age of Fire, sorry, even I'm getting into the cycle nonsense, are still happening. And people are still investigating the means of gaining immortality via all these other convoluted methods, which is the ongoing theme of this game. But anyways, that's enough of that. Again, more to the point, all this stuff is kind of interesting to talk about in regards to the dragons and the stone and the soul being crystal and blah blah blah. But again, the things that interest me more are things like Siegland and Sigmar over there. Because when it comes down to it, what these soul games really need more than anything else is soul. You can create all these little convoluted, nonsensical storylines about turning into squids, or, you know, gaining immortality via using stones, or, you know, cycles that result in more cycles, and you can't break the cycles, and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to it, that's the stuff that I'm more interested in. These little moments of telling little miniature stories with the characters. Because this is all fine and dandy, but just like the arch trees now support life up above us, support the world above us, the foundation, the mechanics of the world, the setting and everything, are merely foundational elements to give weight to the individual fantasy stories of individual characters. That's the way that I approach writing, and to me, that's kind of the strength of the Souls games, which I hope that Miyazaki gets back to with Dark Souls 3, even if Dark Souls 3 ends up fucking up all of the lore in the process. And Miyazaki ends up forgetting what stone is and forgetting what magic is, and which probably will end up happening anyways. That's enough of that. So long, fuckface! Pubic hair, body, nonsensical dragon-ass fucking dragon. Okay. Hey, he finally left! Yay, we finally got that asshole to leave. Okay, so I guess we'll take care of him in the next episode. But for the time being, that's it. If you don't like my opinions about Bloodborne, they're not gonna change. No way for you. This time, joy. Yes, joy. See you guys next time. If you got any more comments, feel free to leave them, and I will completely ignore them. No, I'll read them. I'm not actually being like that. I'll actually read them. You guys are great, but you're also terrible. Just like me. You're becoming just like me. You're going hollow in the process, just like me. One of us, one of us. So long, everyone.